views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, good evening. Welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters, writers, editors. And then in our second segment, we do filmmakers and photographers and videographers and artists. And in our second segment today, we've got a wonderful Bronx photographer who interprets the way he sees the world in the borough of the Bronx. So we'll do that in our second segment. But in our first segment, our longtime friend, David Cruz, many people know him. He was the editor of the Norwood News. Now he is the acting editor for the People and Power Desk at Gothamist WNYC. So good evening. Nice to see you, David Cruz.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
First of all, just out of curiosity, because it is in your title, what is the People and Power Desk at Gothamist WNYC?
Thanks. So yeah, the People and Power Desk is a desk, one of several desks at Gothamist and WNYC that's comprised of both of multi-platform reporters. We do both radio and web for the content that we produce. And specifically, the People and Power Desk translates to essentially the politics desk. But, we examine sort of policies that have a direct impact on New Yorkers, the players, institutions that are charged with carrying out the function of democracy and how political power influences New Yorkers' lives. And so we try to do that through, explainers, through the stories that are happening in the day, and then, of course, enterprise pieces that help kind of crystallize how exactly power is being used across New York City and in New York State as well. The desk formed about maybe a couple months ago, I would say back in July. And we've been really hitting the ground running, covering the Eric Adams administration, the Hochul administration, and all the sort of like the twists and turns in between. So it's definitely kept me busy.
It kept you busy, and I think people will respond to the notion of people and power. I mean, conceptually, it's a nice view of a way of looking at the news world, so to speak. All right, so let's get right to it. I thought your article was the first one I had seen about this, and that is the idea of metal detectors on subways. And of course, people will say, well, wait a minute, I'm running to work. I'm not taking everything out of my pocket and then, go through, put it in a little container and then go through. There's no way you can manage that with the volume of people. But there is apparently new technology out there. So this is something that the mayor is talking about actually doing in our subway system to obviously prevent guns, knives, maybe. Where are we at? What is it?
Right. So the plan is, as far as like Mayor Adams is concerned, he had told several news outlets, including WNYC and Gothamist, that he was floating the idea of moving ahead on basically installing metal detectors or a detection system within the subway system. The problem is that he was very vague in terms of like what exactly that will look like. Although we do know that based on prior reporting we had done, that the mayor is looking at one company called Evolve Technology, and that company has actually installed detectors in other parts of the United States. And so in a news conference last week, he said that, three companies are being looked at for detectors, but he sort of left it vague in terms of, one, how much it will cost, where in the system they will be put in place. But his overarching approach is that he wants safety within the subway system. And so he kind of, in the beginning, it seemed like it was a very off the cuff remark, but, as our headline indicates, like he's moving ahead with that idea. He's tasked his deputy mayor for public safety, Philip Banks, to begin just looking at which companies, which manufacturers will actually be viable to actually install such a tool within within the system.
Listen, you got subway stations and you got 3 or 4 turnstiles at a station. I mean, that is a big commitment. What I'm really interested in is the technology that allows you to do that. And I'm going to give you this. I happen to have occasion to have to go to the emergency room at one of the, a relative was in the emergency room at one of the local hospitals. As you walked in, they said, please walk through this. And they didn't ask me to take anything out of my pockets or anything else. I'm assuming the technology is smart enough so that it will detect either a lot of metal that would be in a gun or maybe even a knife. I mean, I don't quite understand that. It's incredibly sophisticated.
Right. And that is sort of like been the big question that has been left unanswered. It's just whether or not these are like true metal detectors, or if they are sort of like akin to what you see at an airport, in that people can go into a system, there's a screen that pops up, and the software sort of takes the shape, or scans for shapes that appear to look like a firearm, for instance. Really, it's kind of left unclear as to what exactly that will look like. And I will say that Mayor Adams has said that, he is going to be, sort of like assessing it right now. So assessing it could take, I don't know,
who knows how long?
a couple months, right?
He's under a ton of pressure, obviously, to improve crime numbers on the subway and everywhere. And this would be quite an interesting way of doing it. It just, the technology strikes me. And if you say that it appears on a screen, that would suggest that you're going to need personnel. And if you need personnel, boy, you need money. And of course, if you're talking about city money or state money through the MTA, where does that money come from? Where is the personnel? I mean, there are a lot of questions. Having said all that, it's kind of a cool innovation. And if you could actually put it in place, is it in operation in any other cities? Obviously, nothing as large as, the New York MTA, but is it in operation elsewhere?
Well, the short answer to that is we don't think so, though there have been pilot programs that have been launched before in Los Angeles and in Washington, D.C. from the same company I had mentioned before, Evolve Technology, or at least the one in just Los Angeles only. I have to double check on Washington. But essentially, a program has been launched in those two metro areas in the past. And I should point out that New York City also had a pilot program back in 2018 for metal detectors within the Port Authority. And of course, it didn't really produce a whole lot, because that pilot program essentially just fizzled. Nothing ever
in
came.
the Port Authority, before you, like on 42nd Street, before you got on a bus?
Before you got to the subway portion of the Port
Oh,
Authority.
the subway portion. I see. When you go through that long tunnel that leads to the
Right.
8th Avenue side.
Well, actually, yeah, it's within the side of like where the Port Authority is, and where the where you have to like swipe your card to get into the system. I think there was a metal detector which you would have to go through, and then you would swipe. But that
listen, technologically, it's got to be incredibly sophisticated, given the numbers of people go streaming through those things, and we all know that. And then, of course, if you do need operators on hand, boy, that's a lot of operators. I mean, count how many turnstiles there are in the city of New York. But you never know. Maybe if listen, I'm all for anything that can work. Is there a price tag on this?
That's the whole issue with the Adams administration. It's a lot of announcements, not enough detail, and so we're sort of like, we're kind of left at the mercy of what the Adams administration puts out initially. But it shouldn't stop us from begin to start digging even further. I will say that I think notwithstanding the lack of details, this sort of just points to the larger issue that Adams is facing right now, and that he wants to really be the mayor who is responsible for lowering crime. And at the moment, he doesn't seem to really have a good grasp on it. Right now, crime is still up. It's up 42%. And within the subway system itself, it's skyrocketing. Now,
his efforts talking about more police on the subways, those haven't really worked. Moving homeless people out of the subways, that hasn't worked on its own level, but also for lowering crime. So as I said, he's under a lot of pressure to deal with it. I want to ask you another thing, since you do cover the mayor, and another story you wrote was the idea of the mayor releasing his tax information when he originally said no on tax returns. I got to tell you, I can't imagine and in this day and age, especially after the Trump administration, any elected official saying I'm not releasing tax returns. Um, but apparently now he's waffling. Where are we at in the Mayor Adams and his tax returns?
Right. So the mayor initially was asked, I guess, ahead of tax day, which was April 18th, whether or not he would commit to releasing his tax returns, and he said no. And so, of course, that led to a major backlash from good government groups, essentially saying that Adams should be sort of adhering to this tradition that goes back decades, where mayors had released a version of their tax returns one way or the other. And so this past week, he was asked again, and he did sort of like kind of strike this balance between no and saying yes, and that he said he was going to release tax information. And of course, he was using language that was very, very,
Yeah,
very
that's not.
tricky.
There's a difference between tax information and tax returns.
Right,
But,
exactly.
I don't know. I don't really have hard information on this, but um, don't we have regulations or requirements? Shouldn't there? I mean, certainly a mayor.
Well, New York City does have some kind of a. They do have some kind of policy in place from the Conflicts of Interest
Well,
Board.
policy might not be the same. Oh, through the Conflict of Interest Board.
Correct.
Oh,
Yeah.
I see.
Every year, every elected official, from the borough president to a council member to the district attorney, has to release what's called an annual disclosure form,
That's right.
listing all of their, I guess, financial dealings, anything if they're taking out stocks, if they own property, if they owe debt. And so that will sort of give us a little bit of some kind of a line of sight in terms of like what it is that Mayor Adams has been
Right.
investing his money on and where exactly he's been
Uh,
putting his
you-
money towards.
a living and breathing example would be the former lieutenant governor of the state of New York, Brian
Right.
Benjamin. So yeah, it's just very interesting to me. And Mayor Adams, who wants to be the law and order guy, and wants to clear up things from the past, and yet a lot of the people that he's hired have had conflicts that have had to be reviewed very carefully. People who he's put in the head of agencies, some of whom are relatives. We're not quite where we want to be on all this, as far as I can tell. Anyway, Dave, so what are you working on next? Give us a clue.
Well, I know that we are expecting the executive budget to be released this
Uh-huh.
week. And we know that the mayor has sort of given a preview as to like what will be included in that executive budget. And that includes $171 million for safe haven beds and another $900 million for infrastructure across New York City spread out over 5 years. And so I think this is sort of like, an extension of an olive branch to the New York City Council, who thought he had presented a kind of austerity budget. So we're
Uh,
not for that.
David Cruz, this is why we have you, because you will be telling us all about it, get us the details, and then as time permits, we'll bring you back to the Bronx Buzz to review it, just like we did this evening. So, David Cruz, acting editor of the People and Power Desk at Gothamist WNYC. Thanks for your great work, as always, and for your longtime friendship, too.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to go to a Bronx photographer who has a very interesting point of view in a gallery coming up that showing that you'll be able to see as well. All right, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I am thrilled about this particular segment because I happen to know this photographer for a very long time. Outside of him being a photographer, we don't live too far from each other. So let's bring on a photographic expert, photographer extraordinaire, Ira Merritt. Ira, nice to see you again, even on TV as opposed to in the grocery store. And nice to have you with us. Let's just talk about you as a photographer. I know you've had a long life of taking pictures. When did you get started? Why did you get started? What has been the motivation to keep you taking pictures decades and decades and decades?
It all started about 1977,
Wow.
and I was 27 years old, and my wife and I quit our jobs and decided to travel to Europe. We traveled for almost a full year.
Well, I didn't know that. How
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. And I had looked at the work of Paul Strand and Achi, and I went to Europe, and I thought I would be photographing the the burnt out buildings and things like that. And I found that they were all sandblasted and beautiful.
Oh,
So, so
so that
but
didn't work out.
yeah, but I was still looking for that that phenomena of Europe at the time, and I managed to find it here and there.
Right? One thing led to another. And so I'm just going to make an assertion here. You just like the idea that you see things and you'd like to represent that and you use the tool to represent that to other people. I mean, that's the germ of what you try to do.
Um, I think it's more of an artistic sense of um, photographing composition wise and tonal quality wise were very important to me, more than the subject matter itself.
Fascinating. So so the artistic aspect of it, folks. We're going to look at a couple of very interesting photographs that have changed the way you look at the world. So let's see. The Gallery 505 is KRVC is doing that at their offices. Actually, you
Right.
said they did have like a by appointment only viewing, but May 12th. Thursday, May 12th at 7 p.m. They're going to have the actual official opening. There's a look at it, including one of the photographs. Where is that photo? Where is that photograph from? By the
That
way,
was actually down in the parade grounds.
of Van Cortlandt Park. Yeah.
And they're all taken in Van Cortlandt Park, and this was during a fog, and it's the trees that line the pathway for the runners.
How much of it, when you look at that photograph now, how much of that is planned, and how, like, you say, okay, I'm going to take it this way, and then you see what it's going to look like afterwards, or is it one of those things that you just take a bunch and then say, oh, if we handle it this way, we blur it out, we make it black and white, how much is planned and how much is kind of artistic accident, so to speak?
It no, the photographs are taken purposely for their artistic value, and later on, this process took me 6 years to do,
Wow.
and
And were you doing it with the idea that you were going to create this thing, or did you just say, "Well, now after 6 years, I happen to have a show available"? How deliberate was it that you were shooting for this ephemeral concept?
no, actually, it started out when my parents were infirm and not doing well
Oh,
in their last few years of life, and I needed a place to go to
oh,
to feel
Feel better.
feel better about
Yeah.
myself. And so
Right.
I went to the park just to photograph the changes of the seasons. And that lasted 2 years. After 2 years, I showed the work to an artist friend of mine, and he said that the work reminded him of winter. So I went back and looked at the work, and I decided to photograph things with the theme of winter. You know, winter not only being seasonal, but winter
A state
as
of mind.
a state of mind. Yeah.
So I want to just get to some more pictures. We want to show
Okay.
people what it is that they're going to see when they go to the opening, and then of course the gallery at KRVC in the future. So let's take a look.
Okay.
Anderson has the photos, so let's take a look at this. This is
Hopscotch.
Hopscotch in the Van Cortlandt Classic Playground.
No, it
No.
was actually photographed near Jerome Avenue.
Ah,
It was the lines were made by the mother. She drew it out, and it just
there you
just
go.
happened. I was actually looking for a hopscotch, some kids playing hopscotch, and I couldn't find it. And I spent hours looking, and then finally, when I was up at Jerome Avenue, I saw this mother drawing out
There
the
you go.
outlines.
And I love the lightness of the hopping that you captured
Yeah,
in that. All right, let's take a look at another. This is like "Don't Fence Me Out."
Well, it also has meaning to me because when I was 18 years old, I had an Achilles tendon operation, and it prevented me from playing basketball anymore. And I love playing basketball. So
So there you go.
it's
There's
I call
something
it game
symbolic.
over.
Game over.
Yeah.
Very good. Or game not even begun.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at another one. This is a much cleaner shot of that tree thing. You know, you look at it, and it looks like one tree, but if it's very subtle, you can see the trees lining the sides
Mhm.
of it. This is really the definition of a winter feeling picture, even though I'm guessing in our North Bronx area, that is not the winter because you wouldn't have leaves
I
if
think
it
it
was
was, late fall.
late fall. All right,
Yeah.
maybe it was closer to winter. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
wrong. Could be. All right, let's take another look. Let's see. Now, this actually our producer or production assistant Anderson said he loved this sort of picture. Let's talk about this.
Yeah, it just happened quickly. I saw the umbrellas and I quickly shot it. But it reminds me of the film Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and I the idea that things are what they are, but they could have been something else.
So here's my curiosity. Now I realize, okay, so the stationary tree is one thing. I mean, it might have been swaying in the wind. Did you take it with this final product in mind, or did you take it like, did you literally blur the focus of it, or did you then ultimately do that either in development or some other, now we have so much technology, that kind of thing.
All right. What happened was the last 2 years of shooting in the park, I looked at the photographs of Mashiya Fugazi. He's a Japanese photographer. He made a book called The Solitude of Ravens, and in it he used mostly blurred images, and it was just the thing that I was looking for to finalize the series.
The concept. So again, did you shoot that, like, looking through your camera blurred? I mean, that's how you did it?
That particular one, it was a little blurred because of the fog, but I blurred it a little bit more.
A little bit more. I'm just curious about this because you would be taking pictures back in the late '70s all the way till now. Do you still use film at all, or at this point,
No,
why bother? It
no,
costs too much money, and you can control the images, right?
no.
It's a yeah.
No, I haven't been in the darkroom in over 20 years.
Right. Listen, I know you live in amalgamated houses, and you're blessed by having, dark rooms and other things that you could use to expand your work. All right, we got a couple more that we're going to show. Let's see what else. I'm going to tell you which one is my favorite. This one is the one. This one is my favorite photograph. Having been on that swing and having pushed kids on that swing, I know exactly what that looks like.
Yeah, I ran. I photographed it from underneath. I lay down the ground and
Really?
photographed. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And do we know who it was who was on the
I
swing?
don't know.
There's a part of it that scares me about that photograph because I'm always worried I'm gonna get hit in the chin with the swing.
No,
Um, and is that one of those that took you a long time to get that moment, to get that spot? Like you took it and said, well, it's not quite where I want it.
no, I just ran under it and photographed it quickly.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing. How often do you go out and shoot pictures? And do you do it every day? Do you do it once a week? Do you do it just at random, or do you do it
Um,
specifically to work on a show like the one you have created here for
no,
KRVC?
I'm working on another project, but I haven't. I have a little bit of a back problem right now,
Oh, I'm
so
sorry to hear that.
I haven't been photographing lately. But I have a project that is to the end of the line in the Bronx, and it's from the it's on the along the 2 and 5 train from about 138th Street to 140 something 41st Street.
And so the end of the line is obviously the end of the line.
Right.
Is there a photographic theme, or you're just looking for good angles? Like why did you select that?
I selected that because I was in a group called the Bronx Photographers Project,
Of course, yeah.
and I came up with this theme of photographing along one of the uh, uh, subway lines. I thought it
Right.
would be a good
Listen,
thing.
Ira, we're gonna have to go.
Okay,
So we know that that's what you're working on. We're gonna look for that, but
okay,
I don't know if we can put up the flyer again. People will be able to go beginning May 12th to KRVC, and it's right in their offices there on what is that, West
right.
236th Street up
236th
in
Street.
yeah up in Riverdale. Ira Merritt, great to have you. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for the great work. Keep taking pictures. We love them.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So, folks, that'll do it for the Bronx Buzz. Thanks to David Cruz. Thanks to Ira Merritt. And guess what? Yep, you're right. We'll see you next week. Good night.